certainly a significant psalm in Jewish liturgy. For Christians, and I think particularly for certain Protestant traditions, there are many, 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 many hymns based on this psalm. And again, I'm not an expert in Christian liturgy but this psalm is a very important one, and it's done in certain of the Protestant traditions extensively. I think there's some classical settings to it. I think Bach even did something. Ira, we're gonna have to have you do a little research on that. But I wanted you to hear two different settings in the Christian tradition. Which is Cantor Nimi or Chazan Hirsch with us today? One of the ongoing issues about, this is kind of a side issue, and we know our group likes to discuss kind of tangential but related issues. The issue about music Cantor Nimi just arrived, good. Oh, Cantor Nimi, I'm happy you just arrived because I'm about to talk about music a little bit. So I like to know if there's anybody in the crowd that knows anything, so I can be a little bit more circumspect than just making it up. It's like whenever I talk about the Constitution, I always just check if there are any lawyers around, because otherwise I can just make it up more, but I have to be a little bit more careful. Anyway, I've told you, giving walking tours is really my passionate avocation, is leading walking tours. It's the thing that I love, just as my hobby. But Google has ruined my walking tours because everybody can look. I used to make things up all the time. And now everybody checks no, Rabbi, it wasn't 1847, it was 1837. Anyway, so about music. So Cantor Nimi, are you here?
Just arrived. Yes, I missed the earlier part of the conversation.
Is he here?
He's here.
Anyway, okay. So in liturgical music, it's always an issue what kind of music gets used in a liturgical setting. And we see, you've heard Joyce and Cantor Nimi and Sam and all of our cantorial interns, et cetera, talk about this issue, which is how do you reflect the culture in which you are set as a community as to what you decide is holy music, so to speak, right? Not just holy music, but music that expresses. So of course, 19th century Jewish music, very influenced by the Western canon. And so you hear the music that we use at CBST from the 19th century, where it's arranged choral music with organ. And this wasn't just an issue for the Reform movement by any means. And the contemporary ear in America wants to hear very folky sounds because that's the sounds that's familiar. And so there tends to be a tension in synagogues today about what kind of music is used to set services and how do we experience music in services. And of course, one of the things I'm very proud about CBST is that we try to maintain a commitment to exploring all genres of music and not just saying, oh, if it sounds like Simon and Garfunkel, that's what we love. But if it sounds like romantic classical composers of the 19th century, that's too, we don't like that. So we want all of it. We want all of it. So that very debate goes on in Christian world also. And some of us in the Jewish world aren't aware. So there are a lot of settings for hymns that are very folky and sing along, and other settings which are more what we would call high church or more classically arranged or more traditional in the Western canon. That's all different from, of course, different settings that Jewish or religious music was set to for nusach, for how we daven. So I found these two different settings. So this, as I said, this psalm is very important in the Protestant, and I'm not sure, it's certainly for the Protestant world, and I'll look up to see if as well for the Catholic. So these are two different. We're going to start today's class with a setting that's more of the folky tradition, and you can feel what it's like. And then we're going to end it with a different one. But in both, they're very powerful trying to get to a powerful expression of the meaning of the psalm. So this psalm is known in hymn world as "Unto thee, O Lord, do I lift up my soul," which is usually, it's the first line of the psalm that we've already studied a little bit of So here is a preacher using the psalm to speak and then lead the congregation in singing. Unto thee, O Lord, do I lift up my soul. So you could be looking at your translation or at the Hebrew or anything to be aware of this psalm. Okay.
This is the correct one, right, Rabbi?
Yes, this is the one I want to start with.
God is on the other side of faith. This side of faith, you don't see anything. Everything seems unseen. You wonder whether you're going to make it. But your faith says you're going to make it. Because God is on the other side. He's got everything together. Praise God. You know, when we come like this, we come with an expectation to hear God's word. When the people of Israel came together in a congregation, they said, teach us your paths, O Lord.
You hear the psalm? Here is using the words of the psalm.
Teach us from your word, your ways. And that is what our heart says today. Let us ask God to pour out His word today and help us today through His word. Unto thee, O Lord, do I lift up my soul. Unto thee, O Lord. Unto thee, O Lord. Do I lift up my soul. Do I lift up my soul. Oh my God. Oh my God. I trust in thee. I trust in thee. I will not be ashamed. My enemies will not triumph over me. Join the singers. Unto thee, O Lord. Unto thee, O Lord. Do I lift up my soul. Do I lift up my soul. Unto thee, O Lord. Unto thee, O Lord. Do I lift up my soul. Lift up my soul. Oh my God. I trust in thee. I will not be ashamed. My enemies will not triumph over me. Teach me thy path. Teach me thy path. Thy paths, O Lord. Teach me thy path. Teach me thy path. Thy paths, O Lord. Oh my God. I trust in thee. I will not be ashamed. My enemies will not triumph over me. Oh my God. I trust in thee. I will not be ashamed. My enemies will not triumph over me. You are the way, the truth and the light. You are the way, the truth and the light. Oh my God, I trust in thee. I will not be ashamed. My enemies will not triumph over me. Oh my God, I trust in thee. I will not be ashamed. My enemies will not triumph over me.
All right. Thank you, Harold, for So you see that it's an unusual congregation that's taking from that's a Protestant congregation that's using this psalm in a very profound way. And this, you'll see this in almost every Protestant church in some way will sing this psalm at different times of the year. This is a very, very big psalm. And at the end of class today, we'll hear a very different setting. The setting we just heard is sung a lot. But we'll hear at the end of this class another very different setting. And again, Harold mentioned this once. It's really a fun rabbit hole to go down to go into YouTube, to type in the first line of the psalm. Usually it's the King James Version translation of the psalm. Unto thee, O Lord, do I lift up my soul. And plug that into YouTube and see what comes up. And you'll just be able to spend some wonderful hours of exploring different settings, different communities, really wildly different, of any psalm, by the way, and any verse. But typically they use the King James translation, and you could play around with that. And it's really, really, really fun. I have a great time doing it. Okay, so we're going to go back to, were there any comments about that we should, because it was a pretty interesting.
Well, it was interesting that it was from what is with my camera today? It's interesting.
Carl, where are you? I don't even see you.
I'm here. That okay, it's from India, and it's in India, but English, and someone said, isn't it great that you're showing this given your most recent appointment for religious freedom around the world?
Yeah, I think American Jews, and I recognize that not everybody in the group is Jewish and not everybody's American, but I will say this as a generalization about American Jews. We have very narrow perspectives on Christianity. And Christianity, please remember, most Latin American Christians, guess what, weren't Christians historically until they were missionaries who went into Latin America, went to Africa, went to Asia, went to China. Missionaries went all over the world. And for hundreds of years now, there are traditions of Christianity, even longer than hundreds of years in many cultures that are not what we in North America tend to be very narrowly defined Christian. And so there are lots and lots of Christians who don't look or sound like a lot of the Christians American Jews tend to have. India, of course, was a British colony. I'm not sure, was this from India?
It was India, yeah.
Okay, so India was a British colony, so English is actually spoken all over India. So that's actually not unusual at all, as the same thing with other of the British Empire. They're obviously not part of the British Empire anymore, but India was part of the British Empire. So English is a language in India. And yeah, okay, Cantor, I see he has his hand up, and he'll correct anything stupid I said about music.
Not to correct, just to add on this idea that I'm gonna make now a generalization.
Yeah.
That all faith communities absorb musical styles from their host culture. Right. That is just a universality. And that's certainly true for the Jewish community, certainly true for Christian communities. The point that was being made earlier about in Europe, where the project of Lewandowski to clothe cantorial chanting or Jewish sacred chanting in the aesthetic of Western European classical music aesthetic and arrangements is in no way dissimilar from Karlbach or Joey Weisenberg or any of those figures in America who clothe Eastern European Jewish folk chanting tradition in the American kind of urban folk revival or American folk music idiom more broadly. We all do it. We all absorb music from the host culture, and there's always tension of how much of that absorption is appropriate.
Right. And by the way, this is not to undermine it or to say it's not valuable or not religiously meaningful. It is. And in language of academia, it's called syncretism, that every culture takes on things of other cultures. It's the natural. If you listen to a North African, if you listen to our member chant Torah, Ofrain, Avi Ofrain, who's from Morocco, when he chants Torah, he has absorbed the musical modes of Arabic culture, because that's what Jews in Arabic countries. So for Jews in Morocco, what sounds Jewish to them doesn't sound anything that's familiar to a North American Ashkenazi Jew. And that's part of breaking things open, I think, not undermining it in any way. So I don't want anybody to hear that I'm saying, therefore it's not valid. It is. And syncretism, that fancy word, means it happens in everything. It happens in clothing, right? Look at the way all of us are dressed. This isn't Jewish dress per se, right? But we're Jews. If we are Jews, we're dressed like this. We absorb the clothing. We absorb religious practices, things that we do that we think are often taken from the cultures in which we find ourselves. Okay, then we're going to take two quick comments and then move on. This is, yeah, much to say about all this, but go ahead.
Yeah, I love this conversation, but I comment about Cantor Nimi. Yes, it's very typical that Jews and Christians would take from the culture they're in. The interesting thing about this clip that we saw was these Indians were not copying Indian, they were copying American culture, which is kind of strange.
Well, no.
American evangelical kind of style.
But that's Christianity. So Christianity is a global tradition, right? So they're going to be exposed to each other's music, and they're going to be taking, yes, it clearly has a kind of gospel-y, spiritual sound, but they're not taking it. That's why Cantor Nimi and I want us to be careful about the language. They're absorbing it, but Christian culture is a global community. Right. So it's not like taking. I think we need to they're being influenced and absorbing.
Right, but they're not absorbing from the culture they're in. That's from our culture over here.
It's not our culture. It's
the American culture.
But they're Christians, and they're exposed to Christian music from all over the world, and they're speaking English for hundreds of years in India, right? And often so that it's not taking it and it's not strange. We have to see that missionaries, first of all, even before the internet, brought all kinds of traditions all around the world and imposed them, yes, but then communities absorbed them. It's a very complex relationship. And then Jews traveled all over the world and absorbed and took in different kinds of ways. Okay, all right. Sherry and Lisa, and then we got to move on.
So another example of this historically is when you hear the CBST chorus sing Rossi. This is pure Italian Renaissance music.
Yep.
Set to our liturgical stuff. So
absolutely.
Another example.
And it's hard, and I want to just point out, and I think Simon, you'll know this best as a musician. Just because you can see the notes on the page, also, if you're not really culturally familiar, it's still going to sound different if you haven't absorbed what a sound sounds like. You can't just get it from reading the notes, and that's a nuance of. I'm going to stop myself because I could talk a lot about that. Okay, Lisa Brown, quickly, sorry, but there's a lot to be said about that. Thank you, Simon.
So the other thing that jumps out at me as I'm listening to these things is the role.
There you are.
I'm here. Sorry, I'm off.
Okay.
Sorry to be off camera today. But the other thing that jumped out at me was the role of an intermediary, and this is a big difference between hearing a cantor who's more in a classical style and a cantor who's more in a folkloric style, or that style of music. To me, Protestantism really does not have an intermediary. And I think that there is, Catholicism does. And I think that there are sort of not theologically, but de facto, some traditions of cantorial singing does represent the cantor as more of an intermediary between the congregation and God. If they're singing the prayers for us, and we're not singing.
I disagree with that respectfully, because that's assuming that listening, and Joyce and I talk about this all the time, that's assuming that listening is a passive experience of the prayer. And I don't experience it that way. And I think, like, when I go to a concert in which it's obvious I'm not supposed to sing along, You know, there's a famous story of my daughter when she was 3 years old, and the first time she went to Magic Flute, she had to be told you're not supposed to sing along, because that was her. So we all know that there are certain things you don't sing along to in a concert setting where you are listening. But the problem is the word listening or being silent looks passive. I don't experience it as passive, right? That I can experience being silent, but not at all a passive experience. A lot can be happening inside, right? And I think part of the problem is that people's experience of classical music is oppressive, or they feel like they're being sung at, or it's performative. It's not prayerful. And we're trying to break that binary at CBST and say one can absorb and be deeply moved without opening your own mouth. You don't only have to be singing. You don't only have to be verbally heard to pray. And I think that's true about prayer. I think it's true about great music. Okay, this is a big digression. Okay.
No, I completely agree. Thank you for changing my mind about that. And I
think a lot of it sometimes is experienced that way, because it's a lot about intention and the kind of setting. And so I think it happens that way. I don't want it to, though.
Right. So I'll just put in that I learned the entire liturgy from singing with the chorus. So that's my experience. But thank you for that.
Okay, great. Thank you, everybody. Okay, Psalm 25, and somebody's going to read the whole Fisher out loud, right?
Jeremy has asked to read the Fisher.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Jeremy, are you here?
I'm here. Now as I sing, I lift up my soul to you. I open my heart's trust. Do not let me be ashamed. Do not let it close. I know that no one who trusts will ever be ashamed. Let them be ashamed who uselessly deceive, because they are deceived. Show me your ways. Teach me your paths. Lead me in your truthfulness. Teach me, for in you I am whole, and on you do I wait all the day, every day. Remember your tender mercies. Remember your encompassing kindness, which is everlasting, but forget my youthful mistakes. Forget all the harm that I have done. According to your kindness, hold me in your memory, for the sake of all that is good in me. For you are goodness and uprightness. You point out the way of wholeness. Guide the still soul on paths of justice. You teach her your pattern. All your paths are kindness and truth for those who love you and hold you in mind. For the sake of your unsayableness, forgive my confusion, although it is great. Who feels awe at what is? To those will you point out the paths that they should choose, and their souls will abide in a happiness larger than their lives. Your secrets are for those awash in that awe. Your life will become known to them. My eyes always look on you. You draw my foot out of the snare. Turn toward me and be gracious, for I am alone and afflicted. My heart's burdens are heavy. Oh, bring out of these afflictions. Look at my misery and my trouble. Lift the weight of my conduct from me. Defeat my many demons. Pacify the violence within me. Guard me and save me. Don't let me be ashamed. I put all my trust in you. Let integrity and uprightness guard me, because I look only to you. Redeem me and those who struggle on the journey from our pitiful distress.
Wow, Jeremy. Wow. Jeremy, tell me, how did bringing us the psalm this way affect your reading of it? Did it change it at all? Did you have any experience of it differently?
I looked at the psalm after what you said about the rhythms of it, and I tried to catch them and see how that propelled me through the psalm.
Yeah.
And the other challenge for me, other actors in the group will agree or disagree with this, but I was always taught that you never, ever put the emphasis on the pronoun, which is, of course, difficult in this age of pronouns. But yes. In trying to do that, it's particularly difficult here. And so the choice of when to land on that. But also, I had said in my Chavruta, and we talked about this a little bit, that the psalm is not linear.
Yeah.
And I found that the various moods of the psalm became clearer to me as I practiced reading it.
Beautiful. And their power, part of the power is, remember, this was originally an oral tradition, obviously not Fisher himself in this particular interpretation, but there is power to all of these things of hearing them, of saying them out loud, and of not just reading it like a contemporary mystery novel, lying on the couch, just reading it to yourself quietly. And so, Jeremy, thank you for that. And again, these interpretations are powerful and important if they open up even one morsel, one new idea, one new word. And Jeremy, your reading is just spectacular. And and you really captured it. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I want to say one more thing, which is that it's really important sometimes to read these things out loud and try to say as much of it on a breath, because it's part of, I think that puts you in the proper kavanah when you end a pasuk out of breath, because you're trying to encompass it. And that
very interesting. There's a tradition in Judaism, which is, I have this thing with some of our service leaders. I try to instruct people. We're not supposed to say certain things when we do our own prayers. There's a tradition that in the Talmud that you're actually supposed to say them so your ears can hear them, even when you're davening quietly. And I think it goes to this tradition. There is something unique about hearing yourself say some words. Do you know what I mean? That it's not the same as reading silently, that there is something, it slows you down, first of all. You actually have to say all the words. So that is, I think, really helpful for deeper comprehension. But there is something about hearing your voice, even if it's in a whisper, say the words. And I'd encourage people, as you practice Psalms and look at Psalms and you're reciting them, to even say them so your ears can hear them, even if it's very quiet. And to practice like any artist like Jeremy and as an actor would do, to really not be afraid of even doing it loudly at times when it's appropriate, so that you could practice different rhythms and different emphases. And you'll discover things in language that we miss if we just read to ourselves. And I think that's true of all, but especially of literature that was based in a world that didn't have a printing press. And again, I know Fisher is contemporary, but still it's true. It's still true. And it's about anything biblical. I believe that to be true. And Julia, I don't know if you'd say that about Shakespeare, but I find that about Shakespeare. If I can't understand something, if I hear it said, Shakespeare is much easier to understand.
And that's why a lot of my community teaching involves reading plays out loud with people. And they find that what they thought was difficult and inaccessible, actually, even if they don't understand every word, it makes sense when they're reading out loud and hearing each other read out loud as a story. It's very powerful.
Shakespeare wasn't meant to read to yourself, to kind of sit down with a play and read it to yourself. It just doesn't. I'm not sure any play is, but for sure.
One last thing about Shakespeare is that American actors tend to break up the line, and it's terrible. I mean, the British, if they do anything right, it is the fact that they don't do that. They don't, put feeling in the middle of a line that is so full of feeling that to break it with your own is to break the sense of the line, and all of a sudden it doesn't make sense. I don't know, Julia, if you...
I totally agree. I'm not an actor, but I work with a lot of actors. And
so if you say to be or not to be, you've already destroyed it. Because that's not the line. The line is to be or not to be. That is the question. It's one thought. So don't dwell on your own feelings about
okay, I'm
suicide.
going over to Shakespeare digression for a second to say the best place I've seen Shakespeare in the New York area is the Hudson Valley Shakespeare Festival.
Yes, they're great.
They're fantastic. Shakespeare in the Park I go to every summer because I'm a New Yorker, but the Shakespeare is actually kind of lousy because they get these movie actors who are famous TV and movie actors to get the crowds and the publicity, but they don't know how to do Shakespeare, except for Sam Waterston. He's great at Shakespeare. Hudson Valley Shakespeare Festival, there's a train that goes up there, and then there's a shuttle from the train to the, or at least before COVID. I strongly encourage people in the New York area to check it out. And they're doing, and they're doing it this summer in August, I hear. I think they're doing the Tempest. Anyway, okay. All right, we are running out of time. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at 2 more translations of Psalm 25. We're going to end Psalm 25 today. I know I didn't do a lot of Hebrew of Psalm 25. We're doing it a little different this week. And then we're going to go for personal offerings. And Rosh Chodesh Elul is Sunday and Monday. It's a 2-day Rosh Chodesh. Some Rosh Chodesh, new month, the beginning of the new month, are 1 day. Some are 2 days. That's a whole other discussion. This is a 2-day Rosh Chodesh. And so we're going to start each day of the month of Elul with a different person in class reading Psalm 27, even if we won't be studying it. Last year, you remember, we took the whole month of Elul and studied Psalm 27. This year, we are going to start each class. So I don't know how we'll do it, Harold, but we'll want volunteers every day, a different person to read either in Hebrew or English. Any translation you want to use of Psalm 27, just so we'll start every class. And Harold wants to invite folks again to his minyan. He goes to the minyan of the Sutton Place Synagogue every morning for the month of Elul. If you want to hear shofar, which is traditionally sounded for the whole month, and Psalm 27, and Harold will get you the information. It's a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful way to experience a daily morning minyan. If you'd like to stop in once or be a regular, there's no pressure. Linda, are you raising your hand?
You know what? Let's
finish up.
We'll go over all of the particulars.
Right. Okay. Yes, exactly. Let's do these. Let's Bernstein. And folks, try to really raise your hands electronically. It's a lot easier for us.
Okay. Sherry Dratfield had really wanted to read.
Okay.
Sherry,
okay.
would you like to read this for us?
Yep.
Sure. Simon's getting our copy, but I can read this. I bring myself to you, trusting you won't turn away, but will accept me and show me a path back to you. Remember mercy, forget the sins of my youth, open a door to awareness of you, an unveiling to calm my soul. I'm trapped in a maze with a net at my feet, and you are my only way out. So turn to me, hear me, be kind and forgive. I'm poor and alone and pursued by enemy forces beyond my control. I reach out to you still again.
So we see in Bernstein, or Bernstein, whatever how she pronounces it. First of all, she does not care about the architecture of the original psalm. That's not what she's going for. She leaves behind the superscription, the numbering of the verses, no le David, and she goes to exactly the question I keep asking all of you. If you were to write this psalm to be absolutely every word you put on paper meaningful to you, what would it look like? And for her, you see what the thrust of the psalm is for her. Can we make it a little bit more? I can open up and look at my own. It's a little small for me. So immediately for her, you see how I bring myself to you is how she starts that psalm, lift up my soul to you. But she sees the agency, which is I'm bringing myself to you, trusting. This showing a path, learning, teaching me how to do this. And very much, and this goes to what some folks said yesterday. Oh, we didn't do the other reports from the groups, Harold. That's my mistake. True. All right, remembering mercy, forget the sins of my youth. So acknowledgement of that, open a door. Again, asking very direct, very personal, you capitalized are my only way out. Her formatting is always worth paying attention to you. So you see there's a second space, I forgot what that's called, between me and here. And then at the end of that stanza between still and again. So turn to me, hear me. I reach out to you still again. So there's a rhythm to that. So turn to me, hear me, be kind. So this psalm, remember when we first started discussing this psalm, I said it's a perfect psalm for preparing for the days of awe. Because for me, it does have that sense of approaching the Holy One, being aware of our own weaknesses, looking for the path to get to wholeness and needing help to find that path. And her version of it very much resonates with that kind of interpretation of the psalm. Okay, I'll stop there for quick comments on Bernstein, and then we're going to look at Manda. Aura?
I was struck by the last line where it said still again.
On any of these.
Yeah, so what does that mean for you? What do you think about?
So initially still was quiet, and then it was eternally, always, ongoing. Without stop. Again, you know, this is an ongoing process, so to speak. It's an ongoing plea. It's an ongoing event. There's no beginning and no end to it. It just continues.
Yeah, and I like the again also because it for me, it has a little bit of a feeling, which also makes it for me very much a pre-yuntiv or a part of this season of the year. Okay, we got to do it again. We need help again. You know, we have fallen down again. We've lost the path again. And so that feeling of needing, yeah, okay. And part of the, I reach out to you still again. Maybe I screwed up and I lost that. And again, there's a sense of having to keep going back to it. Marcia?
In general, after Fisher, which I adore, I tend to like Bernstein, but this version for me is too distilled. It's too stripped. It's too stripped down. It doesn't take you on the journey of what, you know, we'll say the original, but you know, we know what that is. Or Fisher's kind of been down. This one leaves me cold.
Interesting. And remember,
although I like her trapped in a maze with a net at my feet. That's, you know, it's very original. It's very different.
That's a wonderful image. Isn't that a wonderful image? That's a really,
yeah, the rest of it feels, wow, like she was rushing through to get it in there.
Well, she certainly, remember we talked about that she seems to have as part of her structural limit, one page. So that's like, it's like a structure of a haiku or a sonnet or an acrostic. She's keeping every psalm, no matter how long, to one page. But I agree. Sometimes you need time to say what needs to be said.
Well, it lacks the beauty and the struggle
so
of what it means to find God and to understand and to create this relationship and to lose God and to be human. Be human. Okay.
I think I agree with you, actually.
Okay.
Thanks.
Betsy.
I know. But I understand what you're saying there.
You know, though I agree with everything Marcia just said, I think in the order of how we've been reading these interpretations, reading Bernstein now, it feels just so incredibly vulnerable to me that
I agree with you too.
That to me, it gets to the core of what the psalm is. And I don't know if I would have felt that way if we hadn't spent the whole week looking at the other versions and interpretations, but especially after Fisher, which I thought was incredible. Having this now, it like goes right to the heart of the vulnerability I felt in Fisher. And
Betsy, I agree with you also.
There we go. Right. Isn't it wonderful? That's the sharing that's so terrific in this class. Thank you.
And that's why I think it's important to look at a few different ones and I try to start with the most close to the original so that we don't we appreciate that, whether or not we choose to reject it or absorb it. Ben, and then we're going to just look at Manda quickly too to end our time. Ben Shafran?
What I find extremely interesting in the original Hebrew text of this Psalms is the poetic imagery, which in most cases doesn't come through in any of the interpretations or translations. There's some fantastic, powerful imagery that doesn't get through. Bernstein's, in this case, is able to create imagery where not too much of it exists.
Very good point. Wonderful point. Yes. So, all right. Now we're going to look at Manda, and I do tend to like to go from the most connected to the original to those who are doing more interpretive, less. So we're going to look at Manda. Do we have a reader for that? This is the.
I think Monica Raymond had wanted to read earlier. Monica, are you available?
I don't have this, and I can't really see this because it's too small. So.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, I'll do it.
Okay.
To you, O Mother, I lift up my spirit in you. God, I place my trust. Do not let me be shamed by those who want to humiliate me. No one who hopes in you will be rejected. Those who abandon you will be confounded by their own loss. Teach me your ways, Chochmah. Lead me along the path you have chosen. Help me say yes to what you set before me. There are so many ways I can fail. I'm surrounded by those who will benefit from my failure. They set snares to catch me. My fulfillment comes from being open to what you send. You have known what is good for me from the beginning of time. Forget the errors of my youth and teach me self-compassion as you continue to forgive my faults. Turn towards me and be generous with your gifts, mother and friend. Help me because I am lonely and suffering. Lighten my heart and relieve my distresses. Hold me in the embrace of your forgiveness and protection. You have called me to integrity and holiness. My soul rests in the shade of your love, and your smile gives me courage. You, Bina, are my hope. Make my troubles disappear and deliver my spirit from depression.
Thank you so much. The wonders of the internet, right? We could just make it bigger. Thank you for that. That's beautiful. So I love the way she uses the two, so she uses Chochmah and Bina, which are two feminine nouns in Hebrew assigned to aspects of God and used in the Sfirot and the Kabbalistic. And this is beautifully done. So a few comments about this, just obviously just, we have to be fairly brief, but are there some quick responses to that?
Linda Solomon has her hand up.
What captured me immediately was verse 5 that she says, my fulfillment comes from being open to what you send.
Yes.
You have known what is good for me from the beginning of time. That encapsulates for me everything, that God is all-knowing, ever-knowing, ever-knowing.
And it's not always what you want.
Right, exactly.
Right. I know, I think that's a very powerful spiritual place to be. My fulfillment comes from being open to what you send. And that's not, you know, you don't always get what you want, but you get what you need, right? And that's very beautiful. Any other comments?
That's all the hands I see right now, Rabbi.
All right, so this is, I think this is a beautiful place to end, and we are going to then ask folks for personal offerings. Harold, by 5 on Sunday.
So here's what I'd like to do. I know that some people had Psalm 24 personal offerings, right, and some people I imagine have Psalm 25. Annika has been out on medical leave, so I'm going to be collecting the offerings. So 5 o'clock on Sunday is, it's it. 5 o'clock on Sunday is the deadline for offerings for 24 and 25. Send them to me. Just send them to me, and I will be coordinating them, and we will read them on Monday. So, and I will be sending out an email with all of that. I will have a sign-up sheet for Psalm 27. all of the days of Elul, and you can just put your name down and you can read, as the rabbi said, Hebrew or English, whatever translation. I will be sending out information about the Sutton Place Synagogue Minyan, which is at 8 o'clock in the morning with a 7:45 sign on for schmooze.
So you can do both?
Yes.
As Harold does every morning?
Yes, you can do both. And also, of course, there's Psuche de Zimra, which we studied with Rabbi Rapport earlier when she was teaching us earlier. So that's it. That's the offerings and the sign-up sheet for 27 in the morning minyan. It will all go out. And Rabbi, you had some music that you wanted to play us out with?
Do you have that other YouTube?
I do.
So this is, again, the same words of the Psalm with a very different setting.
All right, hold on, let me pull this up.
And Harold will put both of these up in Facebook, so folks can go back.
I will. Hold on just a second.
It was created by a well-known
having a minute to get it right. All right, so here we are. Skip the ads. Screen share. Okay.
All right.
It's beautiful.
Thank you, everybody. And maybe Ira, well, we'll talk about others. Okay, thank you, everybody. Shabbat Shalom. Tomorrow night, we're having services for the